Justin, we've got a debate going on today. Want you to weigh in on it. What is your all-time favorite uniform in sports, any sport?
Ooh, all right. So I'm based here in Cincinnati. I covered the Cincinnati Bearcats for about 5 years on the beat, and I know like those old Jordan, Kenyon Martin era block uniforms. Those are pretty iconic, and kind of the new uniforms they have now are kind of an homage to those. But I would put those up there as some of the best, especially in college basketball. Beyond that, it's a great question. I think the black and red just combination usually tends to work in general. I think St. John's looks pretty good. I think the Atlanta Falcons always look good. So, but being in Cincinnati, I feel like I gotta throw a nod to those old block Jumpman Cincinnati uniforms.
Yeah. There's something about Kenyon Martin, the way he wore them. People don't talk enough about how dominant Kenyon Martin was at Cincinnati. Those were the days, like, honestly. Like, the guy was an
I mean,
absolute force. And
you might feel that
go
way, but
ahead.
just walk into any West Side bar here in Cincinnati, and you'll hear all about it.
Yeah. I bet. Right.
It's
Right.
still painful. That leg injury is still painful here.
I don't doubt it, man. I do not doubt it. So Justin, talk about forces that cannot be beat. Michigan, I mean, just goes into Champaign last night and just absolutely wrecks house. 84-70 is the final. They win the Big Ten title regular season, and they just look right now like a team that cannot be stopped. I know, obviously, I say that just literally a week after they were stopped in D.C. against Duke, but I mean, how can you bet against this team entering March?
No, you're right. I was thinking about it last night as I was watching that game against Illinois. I covered the game where they went into Purdue and just completely, ran roughshod in Mackey Arena against the Boilermakers. And I was thinking the same thing, like, man, I just can't imagine anyone beating this team in March. And just like you said, though, all you got to do is go back to last Saturday if they're in a neutral site and Duke handles them. So as impressed as I am with Michigan, and I feel like in terms of the teams I've watched, especially over the past few weeks here in conference play, I feel like Michigan is the best and most consistent that I've seen. But then you can't ignore the fact that, okay, on a neutral site, they lost to what is obviously a really good Duke team. And, I think you could throw in, some other teams that are up in that mix. But as good as Michigan's been, you can't take away what happened in that Duke game. And so those two are kind of the top two for me. But it's hard to give too much credit and too much shine to Michigan without recognizing what the Blue Devils did to them.
Meanwhile, Illinois has had a really great season, too, especially by their standards. And I think they're probably going to be a 2 seed. That's my guess going into the NCAA tournament. Maybe number one. But do you think they end up resting as a 2 seed when they get to March Madness?
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll probably end up at 2 because, that even if they were to win the Big Ten tournament, that game is Sunday. It's like right before the selection show. And, there's been kind of a lot of debate of how much impact it has. But just the fact of what Michigan's been able to do, unless they would totally fall apart here over the next week. But no, Illinois is in that mix. I think as much as I don't think Michigan State has the same talent level as Michigan and Illinois, you also have to throw them in there when you're talking about this long Big Ten drought of title teams. Like Michigan State just went into Mackey and beat Purdue, and Purdue's a really solid school that's on that list too. So I think Illinois and Michigan in that conference are maybe a little bit of a cut above the other ones. But I think if you're just looking at how these teams have played, this might be the Big Ten's best chance here in the past few years to break that championship drought come March.
Justin Williams, senior college basketball writer for The Athletic, is on with us right now here on BetMGM Gameday. And Justin, I want to take things to Kansas, Lawrence, Kansas, where, it's been a weird year with Darryn Peterson and just him kind of sitting out or taking himself out of games. I feel like the amazing Kansas fan base is starting to feel restless there with that whole situation. Do you think there's a possibility that we could see him sit out or maybe take himself out of an NCAA tournament game?
I mean, I do. If it happens, I genuinely think it would be an injury concern. Now, people can kind of debate, like, well, could he be tougher? Could he be playing through this more? And okay, that's fair. No one's inside his body. No one knows exactly how he's feeling. I don't buy this narrative that he's kind of like just checking himself out or saving himself for the NBA draft or anything like that. Because if that were the case, I think he would have completely shut it down a while ago. I think a lot of the NBA has decided, like, look, this guy's clearly talented. We're going to get him into the draft process, and then we'll decide, with interviews and medicals, how we really, feel about him, whether he's going to be the number one pick or, just somewhere a little bit lower than that. So I do think if we're in a situation where, he's pointing to the bench in the second half of an NCAA tournament game, it's not going to be like, I need to get out and protect my draft stock. I think it's going to be he feels like he's injured and can't go. But that, that has been the storyline that has loomed over this whole Kansas season. And they're really interesting because they beat, Arizona at the time, which was undefeated. They've beat Houston. They've shown that they can, and they did that Arizona game was without Darryn Peterson. Like, they've shown with or without Peterson, they can beat anybody in the country. They can be really good. But, and Bill Self has talked about this, you do want some level of consistency and familiarity when you get to this time of year. And if it's one of these situations where they're going into a game and maybe you have the future number one pick and maybe he scores 25 points and plays really well, or maybe you don't, or maybe he plays the first half and then checks himself out. That's just really tough from a game plan standpoint. That's really tough from a mental, team kind of focus standpoint. And so I think it's hard to believe that they're going to go into the Big 12 tournament or in the NCAA tournament, and a guy who's had trouble kind of staying on the floor consistently all year is all of a sudden going to have a clean bill of health and be able to play a bunch of minutes on back-to-back nights or 2 games in 3 nights or anything like that. But maybe it just truly is a case of, like, he gets healthy at the right time, they all gel at the right time. That, to me, is what makes Kansas just, arguably maybe the biggest wild card in March Madness, because they're good enough to beat anyone, they're good enough to win a title, or they could be in a situation where things just, don't go right for Peterson and the team kind of collapses and they don't even make it to the second weekend.
Yeah, well, and one of those games was Oh, sorry. So, one of those games was literally just a week ago, with your Cincinnati Bearcats going into Allen Fieldhouse. And my question is, Darryn Peterson plays 32 minutes of that game, and they kind of get blown out at home by a Cincinnati team that really shouldn't have done that to them. You got to think that NBA GMs are seeing that paired with him not kind of, as we said, kind of maybe toughing out injuries that he maybe could. Is that going to affect his draft status at all come, this summer? Or is it going to be, or is his talent outweigh that for NBA GMs?
Yeah, so my colleague Brendan Marks and I, we worked on a story a couple weeks ago. It was after the Oklahoma State game when he kind of checked himself out early in the second half. And we talked to some NBA scouts. We talked to some people at the next level, some people in the industry, just kind of about, like, look, has this gotten to the point where he's hurting his draft stock? And at least right now, there does not seem to be a ton of concern among, like, these people at the NBA level. I think, kind of mentioned before, I think what really is going to happen is, like, they're aware of what's happened this year, and they're going to get him into the NBA Combine, and they're going to get him into their, individual team visits and medicals. And I think they're going to use that as a way to say, all right, was this guy really hurt? Was he packing it in? Was there an issue? That's when they'll really kind of decide, is this something that we feel like is a problem? The issue, though, with this season is it's not like he's the clear number one and it's a big, golf behind him. Like, AJ Devonta looks incredible. I thought that Iowa State game was that last Saturday. Best game he's played all year, looked like a number one pick. There's some of these guys, Boozer behind him at Duke, some of these other guys, Fleming's at Houston. You can go down the line and pick all these other players out who have looked really good this year, a lot of them happen to be freshmen. And so I do think if there's a situation where Peterson doesn't go number one, maybe it's because there's a GM who's like, look, I'm a little concerned about this. Devonta really showed all season, like, he was out there. He was, you're not going to probably regret drafting AJ Devonta. So maybe the ceiling with Peterson is a little bit higher, but I think, if he doesn't go number one, it's just because there is that little concern and Devonta's so close to him.
We are in a vastly different era with college sports in general than we were just 5 years ago with the transfers, with NIL, with a lot of confusion about where, what sorts of teams, rosters, organizations are going to have are going to be able to put together on a yearly basis with guys jumping ship and, going to where the best deal is the following year. We know the president is going to be meeting with, he's going to have some sort of roundtable on Friday with people in college athletics about what can be done about all of this. What do we expect to happen there as they try to find a solution to cut down on the chaos? And who knows if the government can do anything about that or will do anything about it, but do we expect there to be something substantial to happen?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm cynical. I don't know that we're going to have many answers coming out of this roundtable. It's scheduled for next Friday. Obviously, things like this can always get changed or adjusted based on the schedule of other things happening in the world. But I do think it doesn't hurt at this point to have as many people who have some say, who have some stake in college sports to get together in a room and talk, even if they come out of this meeting and there isn't like some big grand plan or they haven't necessarily solved many of the issues facing college sports. It doesn't hurt to have everyone together and talking about it, because I think it's become pretty clear, whether you're talking about some of the money and figures that are getting thrown around and teams trying to go over this new revenue sharing cap, or you're looking at all of these legal cases, whether it's players suing the NCAA or schools suing their own players. Clearly there are some ongoing recurring issues in the sport that need to be addressed, and it doesn't look like they can kind of just be solved on their own in terms of the NCAA or the SEC and the Big Ten commissioners figuring something out. And so whether it's something that happens through a court case, or whether it's something that happens with Congress, or whether it's something that happens with the president kind of putting his thumb on the scale in certain areas, there are going to need to be some adjustments made here moving forward. Clearly no one has the exact answer or kind of the right idea of how to do that. But again, the more you can get those people together and talking about it, ideally that will lead towards some kind of progress, or at least acknowledgement of, hey, we need to do something to address all of these issues.
He is a senior college basketball writer for The Athletic, Justin Williams. If you want to take it up with him about the Cincinnati black uniforms of the Kenyon Martin days, if you absolutely hated them, you need to take it up with him at Williams_Justin. Justin, thanks so much for your time today, man. We really do appreciate it.
Absolutely. Appreciate you guys having me on anytime.